On this episode of Technicolor Blood, I'm going to work out some of my anger issues.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I hope I'm not in danger. And we're going to discuss some early signs for Aquaman.
All right, all that coming up right now on Technicolor Blood. Technicolor Blood, we're back. All right, Terrence, let's start off as we normally do with things that we recently watched. I, like you last week, was useless this time around.
Okay, well,
so I'm going to turn
fair.
the floor over to you.
Okay, well, I watched two things that I think are worth noting in one way or another. The first is I watched the direct-to-Netflix film from the Coen brothers. That's not just a film, it's an anthology of short films.
Yes, actually I did watch that, but not in the last week, maybe like 2 weeks ago. So I can at least bounce a little bit back and forth with you on this.
Okay, great. Well, so it was called The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. Mm-hmm. And as I mentioned, it's a Coen brothers movie. And as I mentioned, it's an anthology of several short films. And they sort of reflect the broad scope of the Coen brothers filmmaking style. Mm-hmm. You know, people who are fans of the brothers know that sometimes they like to make movies that are dark and gritty. Sometimes they like to make movies that are, I don't know really even how to describe them, kind of outlandish, cartoonish comedies.
Right.
And this film reflects that entire spectrum. I don't know if you had the same response to it that I did, but I was distracted by the fact that the first chapter of the film is completely different in tone than the entire rest of the film.
Yeah.
So it completely sets you up for an experience that you're not going to have.
That's
so
fair.
that was definitely distracting to me.
Yeah. I guess speaking in general terms, since this is so new, obviously we're not going to unleash spoilers or anything like that.
Right.
I am a big Coen fan. This is probably middle of the road or lower half for me.
Okay.
That first segment I thought was interesting because, you know, the main character, Tim Blake Nelson, in that first portion, the sort of reputation that he had for who he was, they of course did a Coen thing, but they made him a silly sort of goofball,
right?
Even though he was this amazing dead shot killer,
right? Yeah.
so that was interesting. But you're right; it did set up sort of a different tone for the rest of the film. And you know, I didn't love it. I guess that's why I didn't include it on my list. Not that we only have to talk about things we love, but I enjoyed it for Coen reasons at times, but it's one of their bits of their filmography that was sort of probably going to be instantly forgettable for me, maybe with the exception of the last bit. I actually liked the last portion, probably the best of the three. Mm-hmm. But this is one of those where I've seen all that acclaim that is heaped on every Coen movie. This is no different. I've seen all sorts of acclaim dumped all over this, and it just didn't really resonate with me as it did with a lot of other, I guess, folks who watch with a critical eye.
Yeah, it felt like a fun experiment for the Coens.
Sure.
You know, it doesn't really stand as a complete film experience on its own.
Yeah.
But for people who would like a little more detail or context to it, if you're familiar with the Coen brothers, then kind of what we're saying is all of the other segments of it, all the other chapters of the film, which are all unconnected. Like there is no through line to it at all. Each individual story is self-contained, and there's nothing hinging them on each other. But with the exception of the first chapter, all the rest of them reflect the kind of more serious tone of the Coen brothers. So there's some stuff that's along the lines of Fargo. There's some stuff that's along the lines of even No Country for Old Men.
Yep.
But the first chapter is completely in the sphere of movies like The Big Lebowski or Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And it's kind of distracting because if you like those kind of films, you watch this first chapter thinking, oh, this is what the movie is going to be like.
Right.
Then it stops being like that. It becomes a letdown. Whereas if you're the kind of person who did not like those kind of films, then you probably don't even keep watching the movie past that first chapter. You're just going to turn it off because it's on Netflix. And you never even see that later on there might be elements of this movie that are more in your wheelhouse.
Right, yeah.
I've seen on Twitter, several people have mentioned that there's a clear kind of line in the Buster Scruggs chapter where it could have been split in half and it could bookend the rest of the film.
That's kind of what I was expecting while I was watching that first part.
I think that would have been a strong move for them to make, but they didn't. So if you're a Coen Brothers fan, definitely check it out. I think you'll really enjoy it. If you're kind of lukewarm on them or whatever, this is an easy pass.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a big fan, but I was lukewarm, but I acknowledge that could be, I'm probably in the minority there. Okay, so yeah, I guess like I said, we don't want to spoil it or anything. But
yeah, no, there is one thing I wanted to jump out on. You mentioned that you thought the last chapter was the strongest. I didn't. I thought there was an earlier chapter, and I want to say there's maybe 4 chapters in it or something.
I think there was 4. Yeah.
Yeah. I think there was an earlier chapter that was stronger, not particularly because of the writing or the setting or anything like that, but because of the performance of Tom Waits playing a prospector in it.
Right, yeah.
I think his performance
awesome.
just, I mean, it's the standout element of the movie. Like if there is one thing about that film that I say, this is why you need to watch it, it would definitely be Tom Waits' performance as the prospector.
Yeah, and I'll acknowledge too, again, as a big Coen fan, there's a couple of their movies that I was sort of meh on when I first saw them that on additional viewings I just fell in love with. The best example for me is The Big Lebowski. That's one of my most beloved movies. And the first time I saw it, I was just kind of incredulous about it.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised at all if later on I go back and revisit this at a later time with maybe a different mindset, maybe after reading about it a little bit more and seeing other people's thoughts. I don't know. I'm not generally the type to go back and rewatch something that I didn't really like the first time, but for directors that I'm a real big fan of, I could make an exception there, I think.
Right. Okay.
So what else you got for us? You had one more.
Yes. So the other film that I saw recently is the film Sorry to Bother You.
Okay, this is the first thing I'm angry about.
Fair enough.
This is twice now where you've gotten to 2 of the top of my list movies before I got to them. First was 8th Grade, which I still haven't seen, and Sorry to Bother You was my other one, which you have now seen. So I'm only angry at myself here. Continue.
Okay. Well, as long
there's
as
going to be more of that as the episode goes on.
Well, we can all look forward to that. All right, so Sorry to Bother You is the certainly the feature film debut from director Boots Collins, and the entire mini review or comments that I have about this film revolve around him as a director. So let me throw this out to you. Every once in a while, there are really significant moments or specific directors that come along and their style is so unique and powerful and intriguing that they really, really influence a subsequent generation of directors. So I'm thinking of people like maybe Friedkin and De Palma in the 70s, Spielberg in the 80s, Tarantino in the 90s, right? And you've got, they come along, they do this great job, and then they've got contemporary directors who try to do something similar to what they're doing. And those are, we can kind of think of those as like knockoffs, right? But then there's a subsequent generation of directors who, at that moment when they're like just super into film, maybe they're in film school, maybe they're not quite to that point yet, but they're just absorbing everything. They fall in love with what this director or this style of filmmaking is doing. They absorb it all, and then that's what they make, like that next generation, like J.J. Abrams to Steven Spielberg is that sort of thing. So I think based on this film that Boots Collins is that second generation.
Boots Riley.
You're
thinking of Bootsy Collins.
I am.
The funk musician.
Which, when you watch this film, you kind of understand why.
Okay.
Boots Riley, why he is that second generation, even though he's the same age or older than the guys that I'm about to say. He is the lineage from guys like Spike Jonze and Michel Gondry.
Sure, okay.
Right? So when I say that, as a film fan, you kind of have an idea of what might be going on with this film.
For sure.
So I will add this intriguing tease to that as well. everything you've seen in the commercials or trailers for this film is all footage from the first 30 minutes of the film.
Huh, interesting.
They deliberately do not let you see anything that's going to happen later on in the
You
film.
get me more excited about this movie than I already was, actually.
Yeah.
Let's hope this ends up being a positive review.
Well, I will say this. If you're a film fan and you liked movies like Being John Malkovich and Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind, then you should definitely watch this film.
Great.
Because
I'm a fan of those.
This is definitely a film in that wheelhouse, and it's made all the more intriguing because it's from this filmmaker who has a huge musical background and has worked in film production, just not as a director for decades, right? This guy's 47, 48.
Okay.
And he's a black filmmaker, and he brings that to the mix. But that being said, if you're not a huge movie fan, or if you don't know to expect that going into the film,
Right.
it's a huge WTF of a movie.
Okay.
Like, because I did not know any of that going into this movie. I thought it was just going to be like an urban comedy kind of a film, like Dope from a few years ago, or something along those lines, or maybe something like Get Out. But it's not like anything like that. It's
okay.
Yeah.
I thought maybe like it would have a lot of elements of, say, like the TV series Atlanta in it, and it does share a common actor from that as well. So that's kind of what I saw. Maybe this being and then it's sort of like working in sort of probably some racial elements and how the characters relate to each other in different races and that sort of thing. I really had no idea from the trailer, so I'm intrigued by your description.
There's definitely all of that stuff.
Okay.
But then it goes into that. I don't even know how you would describe that kind of filmmaking.
Like a dreamlike sort of
Yes,
seeing through the lens of a different, like through a mind that sees things entirely differently.
Right. Yeah, where it's very different, and if it was played straight, it would be basically a science fiction film.
Wow.
But much like, Eternal Sunshine, right? It's not a science fiction film, right? It's this other thing. Well, this is another thing,
right?
Just like that. And whether or not that works, your mileage may vary. But definitely, definitely someone who likes movies should watch this movie, because I think we need to keep an eye on Boots Riley and see what he does next. I'm definitely intrigued.
Great. Yeah, that makes me even more excited to see it. What did you think of Lakeith Stanfield? He was the main character in this movie. He is also a big character in the TV series Atlanta. Okay,
yeah, and then he's also the other black guy in the white world of Get Out.
Okay,
he's the one dating the older white woman.
Right. Okay, I remember. Yeah,
he's a great choice for the role.
Yeah,
because he's already just his style, his body language and stuff is kind of oddly unique, and that makes him perfect for this film because this film is oddly unique.
I'm all in. I want to see it even more now.
Yeah, cool.
All right, coming up next, we'll talk about some movie news. Terrence, the new trailer for Avengers 4 has hit, and I will propose to you that we talk about this movie. We will put the amount of effort into discussing this trailer as the makers of Avengers 4 did to that trailer, which I don't think was a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like they just sort of held back and said, hey, this movie's coming out. Everyone's going to know when it's coming out. Everyone's going to want to see it because the last one's such a huge hit. So here's a couple of images and whatever. And it felt like to me that they were trying to hit a deadline for a trailer almost.
Yeah, I definitely felt that way too. This is a film that isn't coming out until April or May of next year.
Yep.
So we're going to get a better trailer closer to its release date. I feel like they felt pressured to put out a trailer before the end of the year.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like we're going to have a full discussion about a full trailer at some point. So this trailer only merits a few seconds of discussion.
Well, I will say this. I liked what they did with this trailer in that I feel like they were always going to give us like a super melodramatic trailer, really driving home, oh, everybody's dead.
Right.
And, this is terrible. And everyone's going to mope around for a while. And the stakes are just too high to even contemplate.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that they they used this very short trailer, almost a teaser trailer,
Yeah,
to
it's
get
barely
that
a
out of the
trailer.
way. Yeah, so that the real trailer, the full-length trailer that we're going to get later on, that's the one that's going to show us that this movie is going to be bananas.
with actual action scenes in it.
Yeah, that the budget's going to be huge, the characters are going to be infinite.
Right.
I mean, it's just going to be just a massive, massive movie-going experience. You get no sense of that yet. I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I'm not trying to be over the top critical about it. It's just one of those things where everyone who is excited about the movie is already excited about the movie, and this didn't really I wouldn't think made anyone more excited about it than they already were, which is sort of the purpose of a trailer, to get people more excited about a movie than they already were. Yeah. So that's fine. They need to get it out there just to get people on the scent of it, and it's kind of like one of those things where you watch a movie and you feel like the whole movie was a setup for the next movie. Mm-hmm. This trailer just seemed like a setup for the next trailer.
Yes.
Maybe there'll be one for the Super Bowl or something. It's only a couple of months away.
That would make perfect sense.
Yeah. So we'll see then. All right. I think that's all the time we need to spend on that. Kevin Hart. He's had quite a week. So Kevin Hart achieved his dream of being selected to host the Oscars. And within 48 hours, he was not going to host the Oscars.
Yes.
So that came and went pretty quickly. This is, again, a James Gunn style situation where old tweets came back to haunt him. And he basically refused to apologize. I guess the Academy specifically said, hey, just issue an apology and this will go away. And he did not do that. Right.
So the tweets themselves you could classify them as being homophobic in style. Mm-hmm. Basically, I think the one that really got the most attention was he had tweeted out like way back in 2009 or something like that if he ever found his son playing with a dollhouse, he would smash the dollhouse over his son's head and say, that's gay. Mm-hmm. And that came back to haunt him. So two things that I want to talk about there is first context, right? Mm-hmm. 2009, Kevin Hart's career at that point. This is before he's appeared in all the big name movies that he's been in. This is when he is mainly a very, very successful touring comedian. This was his style of comedy at the time. Like, this tweet is perfectly in line with what was getting him very, very big audiences at the time.
Right.
If you've ever seen a stand-up comedy, A, he says stuff that's a little edgy, and B, he talks a lot about his family.
Yeah.
Right? That's his style. This is perfectly in fitting with that. And, this was the kind of stuff that made him the big star, powerhouse, selling out stadium level comedian that he became, that led him to becoming a star in several hit comedies, which have now led him to being chosen as the host of the Oscars.
Yeah.
Right. So again, all this stuff needs to be looked at within the context of when it happened and at what point in that person's career this was going on.
Right.
Now, that being said, Kevin Hart handled this as badly as possible. Right? So as you said, he didn't apologize. Well, he did, but it took him like a second try to get there.
Yeah, he basically apologized after he'd already said, I'm not doing the Oscars.
Yeah. So this came out, it went viral, it became an issue. He went on to Instagram where he has 64 million fans.
Holy cow.
Yeah. This dude is a massive, massive star. And basically came out on Instagram and said, I'm not going to apologize. This is what I was doing. This is what its own thing. He came back and did it a second time.
I think it's important to note that in that first non-apology, he also addressed the fact that he apparently has addressed this several times in the past.
So I think that was in the second one.
Okay, I'm sorry.
I could be wrong. But so anyway, there's a second time that he got a chance to apologize.
Right.
And I think that was the one where he was like, I've already addressed this several times. I put this behind me.
Yeah.
If you want to know my feelings about how this went, you can look them up. I'm moving forward from this.
Right.
And that's also the point where he was like, the people from the Oscars came to me, asked me to apologize. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to be the host of the Oscars.
Right.
And he just basically walked away from that. Since then, he's come forward again and actually apologized, said it was wrong. He understands why it's wrong. He wants people to forgive him. He wants to evolve and move past it. If he had done that last apology as the first apology, he would still be the host of the Oscars.
Yeah. sure, and I don't really think his career is going to suffer from this.
Not at all. No.
So I don't know. I have a lot of conflicting thoughts about this. I'm not really sure how I feel about it, because again, it is old tweets. It is part of his act, but it also clearly reveals how he feels about certain things. And I think when you get into parsing how people feel about things, you get into a really dangerous area as far as whether they're allowed to make a living or not. I mean, there's a difference between, I guess, having your own personal belief system and inflicting that on other people. And I just, it's just a weird slippery slope for me. And that's why I think a lot of these issues, some people just come at them as so black and white and, oh, this was said, this was wrong. That's the end of this person. And I really do think it's a case by case basis. I think you have to look at each one on its own merits, and you have to look at the proper context. And that's just really where I'm at on it. I've actually had friends and family just out of curiosity asking me how I felt about this, and I don't really know. Like I don't. Is it wrong that is it okay that he's not going to host the Oscars? Yeah, because I think that's a self-inflicted wound. You know, he said what he said, and then he botched the apology. He was combative about it, and that doesn't look great. But I also feel like he should be able to continue his career. So, and like I said, I don't think it's going to be affected. I think he's going to be fine. He's got a movie coming out in January, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of wrong in what he said, and I did not see all the tweets, but you know, that's not a great message to send in 2009 or 2018.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that completely.
Yeah, no one's going to disagree with that.
But I mean, I think, you know, we're 10 years on from when you send that tweet. You know, like he's being vilified for something that's 10 years old, and I have absolutely no reason to believe that he feels the same way about anything now that he did then. I mean, 10 years, I don't feel the same way about anything now that I did 10 years ago.
Absolutely. And I think it's also important to point out that, you know, I don't think we really know how people feel about it, because social media just exaggerates everything.
Absolutely.
So
and he's a comedian, right? You never know how a comedian feels about anything, because their job is to just tell jokes, not share opinions.
Yeah, and you know, Kevin Hart certainly works blue, but there's a lot of comedians who are way worse than he is, who say things that are way more just outlandish than he does. And but suddenly, like when it's a tweet, or when it's related to this subject or that subject, it's just, I think this is one of those things where social media it skews the true way people feel about things, because the loudest voices are amplified, and the folks who are like, you know, if you're like me and you're kind of like, well, I have thoughts on both sides, I'm not going to go out and tweet about one side of it or the other. Like, say I was, you know, a prominent person with millions of followers. I'm sort of like, I don't really know how I feel strongly one way or the other except for like the merits of the individual subjects. Like, yes, is what he tweeted wrong? Sure. Should he lose his job? Probably not. Did he screw up the apology? Yes, he screwed up the apology. But this idea that there's like one answer, that it's right or wrong, we don't really know how people feel, because social media exaggerates stuff so much, and I don't really know how real people feel about it.
Social media also has the problem of condensing the timeline you have to work with, right? When Mel Gibson screwed up, when Paula Deen screwed up, they had days to formulate their response to those mistakes. You know, they did it poorly in both cases, but they had days, and they had people rushing to their side to be like, you know, you need to do this, or no, don't do that, right? Because of social media, when something comes out, like a celebrity has to deal with it like that, like within hours, you know, and that's never going to go well for these people, right? Like they need that additional time for their managers and the crisis PR teams to get a hold of them and be like, you have to do this exact thing to salvage this situation. They're not doing that. Like, you know, they're making these rash decisions. Then those rash decisions are affecting the outcome long before there's time for anyone, for cooler heads to prevail, I guess. And that, I think, is the real bane of social media in relation to this sort of thing. Yeah,
good point at the end there. All right, we will come back and talk about some development news. Development news. Let's talk about that. Terrence, we talked last week about the whole live action to animated, animated to live action, remakes, reboots, this, that. Oh my God.
Yeah. So Netflix has announced that they're going to add another anime series to their pretty impressive list of animated and anime series that they have going on. They're going to do a Ghost in the Shell series, brand new. It's going to be CG for a change. So we've now have the original Ghost in the Shell movies and animated series, which was called Standalone Complex. All of those were traditional hand animated films or productions. Then we had a live action film with Scarlett Johansson, the less said, the better. And now we're going to have a computer animated Ghost in the Shell produced for Netflix. The thing that makes it kind of intriguing is that they're going to have two different directors for this series. And those two directors are, I'm not even going to try to pronounce their names, the guy who created Appleseed, which is another very, very famous and popular anime series from Japan, and the guy who directed Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex. The thing that's important about those two is those were two very, very high quality productions. Like the level of animation was exceptionally high in both of them. And they're if you're an anime fan, you like these two guys. So to hear that they're combining forces on one series, it's kind of a big deal. I think a lot of people are looking forward to it. I know I'm intrigued by it.
Sure.
The CG element of it is, I don't know. We'll see. But listen, the quality should be incredible for it. And CG, traditional animation, when the quality is high, it's all good.
Yeah, I'd love to get excited about an animated upcoming series like that. So this, I think, will depend entirely on what it looks like when I see the first images.
Right.
Otherwise, I think it might float to that list of, I'm intrigued, but I also have these other 10 things I want to see ahead of it, and it just would keep getting bumped down the list,
Yeah, I'm also kind of hoping that since it's being produced specifically for Netflix, it might be a little more accessible to a broader Western audience. If you go back and try to watch something like Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, if you're not kind of on the wavelength of anime and Japanese storytelling, it's a tough road.
It's not an entry point for
definitely not
anime. Right.
So I'm hoping this will be more of that entry point.
Okay, tell us about your Aquaman news that you.
Okay, so I thought this was like an interesting little footnote. Aquaman has not been released here in the States yet, but it has already seen some international release. Including China, as a matter of fact. And just based on that 1 week of international release, it's already made over $25 million, which you have to understand, in a lot of foreign markets, movie tickets are nowhere near as high as they are in the US. So $25 million for just limited international release is kind of a big deal. Now, whether or not that's going to translate to big box office here in the States, who knows? Weirdly, sometimes the popular movies in the US turn out to be popular movies overseas, but we've started to notice, especially in the case of superhero movies, there seems to be a bit of a disconnect. A movie will be only a moderate hit here in the States, and it'll be a massive hit overseas.
Right.
Case in point is Venom. It was a moderate hit here, huge hit overseas. That combined total has made it a massive box office winner.
Yeah. Sneakily one of the top grossing movies of the year.
Right.
Which I never would have guessed.
I mean, certainly the early signs for Aquaman is it will do a similar sort of thing. You know, if it's a huge hit here, that's a bonus, but everyone's getting kind of excited that it's going to be a big hit overseas.
Yeah. I feel like in the States it's going to be sort of not a disaster, but sort of tepid, like Justice League, or I don't think Justice League was a total disaster domestically. Certainly made its budget back, but but it's not going to be one of those that everyone's going nuts over. I could be wrong.
I mean, the wild card is Jason Momoa, man. People dig him.
Absolutely, yeah. He certainly seems like the kind of guy who can be a leading man, tons of charisma. We shall see. Okay. I wanted to get to this story. We're going to go away from comic books and anime and all that and get back to some old school filmmaking news here.
Is that allowed?
I'm going to make it allowed. It's our show, damn it. So Robert De Niro, if you're an old school film fan and you love 70s movies, which I think is, for me, is what got me into movies, and I think maybe same with you, like the 70s era, maybe more like the Star Wars type of thing, that level of filmmaking. I don't know. I mean,
I don't know if it got me into it, but the 70s is definitely, I think, the high water mark for filmmaking.
Yeah, it's definitely what if I was already into it, it's definitely what dragged me down and like really got me into it for the basically the rest of my life.
Yeah, and despite both of us being old, make no mistake, we didn't watch any 70s movies in the 70s.
No,
we're not that old
about that.
Yeah, we're a little bit younger than that. Like we discovered all those films later on after the fact.
Yes, that was a good way to express that. All right, so Robert De Niro. You think of Robert De Niro, you think of Martin Scorsese, you think of a lot of those actors and filmmakers from the 70s. So he's got a movie coming out called The Irishman, which is De Niro playing, I believe, an Irish mob boss. I don't know a ton about it, but the important things to remember is it's directed by Martin Scorsese. It stars De Niro. I mean, basically, it's getting sort of the band back together for one movie or another. Joe Pesci, Harvey Keitel is in it, and Al Pacino is in this movie.
Oh, wow.
So Pacino has never actually been directed by Martin Scorsese. So this will be the first time they've worked together on a movie.
Let's just take a moment to think about that.
I know that was a bit of a surprise.
Yeah.
And of course, in the history in the 70s, 80s, 90s films, when they were sort of in their peak, everyone was dying for Pacino and De Niro to be in a movie together, which they finally got with Heat. Technically, Godfather 2, they were in the same movie,
right,
but they were never on screen together.
Yep.
So Godfather 2, they did Heat together in the 90s. They did a movie called Righteous Kill where they were both in it. I actually have not seen that movie. So this will be the fourth time that Pacino and De Niro appear in the same movie, and the third time they actually, appear on screen at the same time. So there's a couple interesting bits that came from De Niro in this interview I read. He does not do a lot of interviews, and he is notoriously pretty short with the interviewers. So this guy did a good job of at least getting some information out of him. One of the things that, I guess let me back up. I'm excited to see this because it's Scorsese, it's De Niro. I think Scorsese's best movie in recent years was the Nicholson mob picture. Oh my God. What is the name of that movie? You're never going to hear this because Terrence is going to edit it and save me from this. The Jack Nicholson picture, that one best picture that Martin Scorsese directed.
Is that the one that Mark Wahlberg pops up in?
Yes, the one that we need to really know the title for.
Yeah.
Or I'm just going to stop the show entirely.
It's the something.
Yes, the something.
Outsiders.
Jesus, no.
Disenfranchised.
Son of a bitch. The Departed.
The Departed.
The Departed. I swear we're not as old as we sound right now. Okay. All right, so The Departed. So Scorsese, going back to that, he's doing a mob picture. I'm excited for that. The thing I'm less excited about, De Niro lets loose in this interview that ILM did some work on this movie to sort of de-age a lot of the actors.
Well, thank Christ for that.
Yeah, you heard me mention some of the actors that are in this movie, so it's not like they're going to be sent back to being 20-year-olds, but he was talking about how they're all sort of in their 70s now, 70s, 80s, and there's going to be some stuff in there from when they're in their 50s, so it's not it's not something insane. So that's weirdly troubling, but I'm still excited to see it as long as it's used sparingly. The other really interesting portion of this, I think probably the most interesting thing out of this, is that De Niro detailed how he and Scorsese have been trying to set this movie up in Hollywood for years, and it just keeps falling apart. No one wants to put money into it, or they have people say, oh, yeah, we're all in, but we need to get these things worked out, blah, blah, blah. And they started to get frustrated, and De Niro sort of opened the window a little bit into how he works, and he basically said, that's how I am over the years. If I get excited about something and I get someone else excited about it, great, let's do this. But the second I feel like other people aren't excited, I move on to the next thing. So that was kind of interesting. But the real gold from this article was Netflix came along. And I think this is sort of one of those things where you would expect this thing to start happening more and more. Netflix came along and literally said, here's your money, make the movie you want to make. The end. So no restrictions. They gave them the budget they wanted. It was Martin Scorsese fleshing out his full vision of a movie without the producers telling him what to do and trying to fix this and trying to change that. They just gave him carte blanche and they said, yeah, we'll sign on for that. So I would expect that more and more filmmakers, since obviously Netflix right now is just greenlighting everything, that this would start happening, because we've seen this happening with Netflix, but it hasn't been the big name filmmakers that you would expect. And now all of a sudden Martin Scorsese is working with Netflix, presumably because, and I'm sure he was leery about it at first, but then was like, well, yeah, it's Netflix. It's gonna probably, he knows now that with Roma and whatever the other picture is that Netflix produced, they are going to allow some releases to the big screen. I'm sure that was content. I'm sure Scorsese wouldn't do it unless that was part of the deal. So, but the most of its life is going to be on the small screen, but he gets to make the movie he wants to make. So I figure, with Cuarón doing that, and now you have a legendary director, you have a current, one of the best going Cuarón doing this. This is going to start happening again and again, I think.
Yeah, for as long as Netflix is able to just throw all this money out, as we've talked about in the past, no one has any clue how they're staying in business.
Right,
they don't make any money.
Yes, they're many years presumably away from actually being able to make money on the stuff they're spending money on now. But that's kind of how we live as Americans anyway, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just put it on credit.
That's true.
Basically, Netflix is a giant credit card for filmmaking. And I'll just throw this one little bit out there. De Niro also spoke about the long-rumored Taxi Driver sequel. That's a movie close to my heart, my all-time favorite movie by far. And he basically said, yeah, it's not happening. So I was happy to hear that. Yeah. He says they actually had a meeting. He and Marty Scorsese met. They met with Paul Schrader, who wrote the screenplay for Taxi Driver, and Schrader had a good idea, and they got a little bit excited about it and started sort of putting it out there, but eventually it just kind of fell apart, and they all just seem like they're not interested now, which I think is for the best.
Yeah, that needs to happen more. There's too many cases of us getting sequels to movies that are 20, 30 years old, and they can't live up to that.
Yeah. All right, we'll come back with one more segment where I'm going to tell you something I'm angry about. All right, we got one more segment we want to squeeze out here. So, Terrence, we've spoken about Bohemian Rhapsody many, many times on the show. We are both big fans of the movie. We are both fans of the band, and I just have to relay an experience I had recently. So you've heard of the Reelz Network. It's REELZ. Maybe
Yes.
barely heard of them. I think probably most people know them from on the front end of seeing a movie in a movie theater. There's like a couple of theater chains that run these little shorts where it's like so-and-so from Reelz Network and blah, blah, blah. And they scream and there's noises and colors and then, whatever.
Yes.
So there's also a network called Reelz, which just runs like really like schlocky, low budget entertainment documentaries with archival footage, but also some where they cast some poor actor to play a real actor. And it's just like, I'll give you an example. Like they run like a documentary about, Nicolas Cage and how he lost all his money. And there's this poor guy who plays Nicolas Cage, or Johnny Depp and how he lost all his money. And there's poor guy who plays Johnny Depp, like that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I found a couple of Queen documentaries running on that network. And I thought, I'm super like delved back into Queen and gotten deeper into them than I ever had on the strength of seeing that movie. I'll give Terrence credit. Terrence has always been a huge Queen fan, and the movie has helped me get like way more into them than I ever was before. I'm so sad that I wasn't in on that train more than I am now. So anyway, so the documentaries, I'm excited to watch them. One of them is about like the dark life of Freddie Mercury, whatever, like this, probably a lot of the stuff that wasn't in the movie that for some reason people wanted in the movie.
Right.
And then the other one was just like this documentary about the band. So I flip on the one about Freddie Mercury specifically, and within 5 minutes, I realize Reelz Network does not have the license for Queen music, because they're showing footage of Freddie Mercury doing things, and they're showing things of the guy they hired to play Freddie Mercury and the little vignettes that they filmed. And there's no Queen music. It's just sort of generic, crappy music. So I think, okay, well, I'm just going to turn this off. There's another one. I'm going to watch the other one. So I delete that immediately.
Okay.
And start the next one, which is just about Queen in general. So this one starts off with literal concert footage of Queen playing their, and not just like a guy talking and some concert footage under it while they're just talking about the band, but literally 6, 7, 8 pieces of different live performances playing for a good 90 seconds straight. And what you hear is the most generic, god-awful Getty music played over the top. It's not even like hard rock. It's just,
oh my God.
I mean, awful.
Oh my God.
And so many thoughts go through my head. First, why the hell are you making this documentary?
Right.
Second, if there's people out there who may have gotten into Queen or didn't know anything about Queen from the movie and then want to learn more about them, for the love of God, or maybe they haven't seen Bohemian Rhapsody yet and they turn this on and they hear that, then they're going to think, what the hell is the big deal about Queen? This is garbage. Not everyone understands licensing and rights and all that, how all that stuff works. So the documentary goes on, and within a few minutes, there's a guy who was very close to the band. I forget what his position and title was, but he was, I don't know if he was management or a roadie or whatever. I'm probably not giving nearly enough credit. He's talking about Live Aid, and they start showing concert footage from Live Aid, which indisputably is, if not the greatest live performance in the history of rock and roll, then certainly in the top 2 or 3. I mean, I think people will probably bring up Woodstock, but specifically a band in a moment And I've never seen a band control an audience the way that they did.
Right.
And it wasn't 20,000 people. It was like 150,000 people.
Yes.
Amazing moment. So this guy is literally talking about how this was the greatest moment in live rock and roll history. And over the live footage of Live Aid, they're playing generic Getty music. And I just want to smash my television. I got so angry that you do what you do when you're angry in 2018. You take to social media.
Right.
And I started power tweeting at the Reelz Network. This, of course, led nowhere and didn't really make me feel any better. Actually, this is making me feel much better than that did. But I had some folks like chime in saying, I'm not even really a big Queen fan, but this is ridiculous, and like tweeting at Reelz. So
yes, absolutely.
I'm sure my campaign will accomplish nothing, but for the love of God, never watch a documentary on the Reelz Network.
Oh my God. Listen, nothing makes it crystal clear more that this is a schlocky cash grab of a documentary than the fact that you're doing a documentary about a band and you don't have the rights to play any of their music.
So once again, 5-10 minutes into this, I immediately deleted it. Those two documentaries combined were 3 hours. There's nothing, and there's nothing in information or that I didn't already know, or footage or interesting stories that any of those people could give me that would overtake the feeling of anger I had from hearing that garbage music. It's about a band. It's about a musical band.
I don't see how you could even believe anything that they were trying to tell you when they couldn't even be bothered to work out the deal to get the rights to the music.
I know. Good Lord.
I mean, that is how somebody would make a documentary about a band on YouTube. Like, that's how like just an obsessed fan in his basement would make his own documentary for YouTube.
That's a perfect description. It is a basement produced documentary. Maybe I'll try to see if I can get Brian May on my side and just put the network out of business.
Dude, yes, go for that.
All right, well, that's all we have for you guys this week. We really hope you enjoyed listening. You can always hit us up on Twitter at TechBloodPod and check us out soon for another episode.
And whatever you do, stay away from the Reelz Network.
Stay far away. All right, guys, thanks a lot. See you next time.